Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Katey Rich, the Awards and Audio Editor at Vanity Fair. Before we are joined by our guests today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. And now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce two Emmy-nominated actors, Josh O'Connor, who plays Prince Charles, and Emma Corrin, who stars as Princess Diana in Netflix Emmy-nominated, critically acclaimed drama series, The Crown. Welcome, Josh and Emma. Thanks so much for talking to me.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So since season 4 of The Crown premiered almost a year ago, it's seemingly all anyone can talk about. The excitement keeps building. You were both nominated for Golden Globes and nominated for SAG Awards and winning awards, nominated for Emmys now. And what's your response been, and how has it maybe changed in the months of people just talking nonstop about The Crown?
It's sort of still as overwhelming as it was. I don't know how you feel, Josh, but also so strange because I mean, now we filmed it so long ago that it's like, I feel like it's starting to get really nostalgic when I talk about it. I sort of, because it feels so far away that yeah, it feels very strange. Like it could have been a dream, or like, I get quite emotional when I'm talking about it or thinking about it because it feels like another, part of my life almost.
It definitely feels like we've talked about this job for 2 years, right? I mean, like the length of time it's taken talking about a job, it's like it was like quarter of that making it. So it's really weird. It feels like Emma and I made the sort of show, and then we've had this other job which has been telling the story, like talking about making it. So it feels strange, and yeah, as Em said, it's quite nostalgic now.
It is nostalgic, and it's also weird because I mean, for me, that was like one of the first things I did, and I've sort of been working since then. And it's really mad to like look back on it and think feels like I was such a different person and like so new and fresh. And it's weird to think about all the stuff I've learned or experienced since then. Yeah.
Did the producers on The Crown or anyone at Netflix kind of prepare you for the amount of excitement that was going to build? Did you feel aware at all of how much attention was going to be on you when the show premiered?
I guess, I mean, to be fair, we did have sort of series 1 and 2, and we saw what Claire went through and Matt and I mean, I don't know about you, Em, but I think I always saw that the fact that we were telling Diana's story in particular, I thought that, you know, there is a kind of extraordinary relationship that the public have with Diana, and with that relationship in that period of time. And so I guess I sort of did always think that there would be a certain amount of attention on it. What do you think, Em?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we had this sort of build up from and saw how the response was from 1, 2, and 3. But also, I think no one can ever really prepare you for what it will really feel like for you personally. Also, because it was COVID, I think it was doubly strange because, like, I think a load of people watched it and were very, like, sort of engaged by it because everyone was essentially like in their homes, had nothing else to do. And also, we were sort of on the receiving end of that, also in our homes, just like, and all we had was like our phones and the internet to receive this sort of news. It was really, yeah, it was a wild one. There's a black episode in there somewhere. I don't know where, but
did you find it helpful in the COVID lockdown period to have that going on? Like it's, you know, it's a distraction, it's a way to connect with the world, even as you're locked inside your house. Was that personally helpful for you guys?
I think I mean, it was nice. It was nice to be able to check in on my mate every now and then. I like, you know, we weren't allowed to see anyone, and yet I was probably seeing my partner and Emma the most because it was like me and my girlfriend were living together, and then you know, Em was like my only social contact via interviews like this, which is quite nice. It's a good way of checking in, I think.
And I guess because for the most part, our whole industry sort of came to a standstill, which meant we weren't working. It was also quite nice to be busy in terms of like doing a lot of interviews and at least talking about the thing you love doing.
Yeah, and there's the other thing is that I was doing one of these recently with Suzanne Mackey, who is one of the producers, and she said, you know, one of the sad things about this series was that we never really got a chance to say goodbye. And so, because we were cut short by a week, and so there was something about doing the press, Emma and I in particular, being able to reconnect and sort of have some sort of closure of it. Albeit it's been a year's worth of closure, but it's good to have that, I think.
Yeah.
So to go back to these different people that you were when you started on The Crown, and they have these like buckets and buckets of historical research that they do when they're writing the show. How much of that do they hand over to you? Do they give you homework? Do you give yourself homework? Where do you start when you dive in on a season of The Crown?
Yeah, it's sort of a combination of things, I guess. You have the research that you do yourself, and then there's the research that the research team give you. We got presented with these like mad files with like loads of information that they'd sifted through. And I think it's sort of like a process of figuring out how you want to approach learning about this person and becoming this person. For me, the thing that really changed it was working with Polly Bennett and William Conacher on like movement and voice and stuff that helped me really embody this person and like work her out from the inside out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Emma and I both work quite similarly, I think, insofar as we, both mad about detail and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, I know Em had a lot of fun with that what was the documentary, the Diana in her words.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I sort of like I just sort of ended up because also I'd had a bit of a lead up in season 3, and so I had a little bit of a kind of head start. I just looked at loads of stuff about marriage and marriage breakdown because I was just sort of fascinated. Me and Emma's big task, or the thing that we both wanted to kind of achieve, was to make people feel like, that it might work out, even though we all know it doesn't. We wanted to make people feel like, yeah, there might be some hope, or there's some love there, and so a lot of that research about, how perfectly happy marriages can kind of fall apart, I found really helpful.
I think about the way that Charles is established in the previous seasons is, you have so much sympathy for him and his relationship with his parents. And I felt like that built into the beginning of season 4 with the Charles and Diana marriage, because he was so often portrayed as the villain in that marriage. Did you find that helpful to have that backbone? And then what did you want to change about the way Charles emerged in this season in that relationship?
Well, I guess, this is what I suppose that's why I was quite fortunate to have season 3, is because if my task in season 3 was to make people feel sympathy for this character, I guess season 4 is like, that's all sort of ripped from under you, really. And I suppose that's helped by, of course, Emma coming in and her sort of electricity and, the way that she kind of, Diana takes up that space. I think it's really, yeah, I suppose the contrast was always really nice. We all love to play the kind of the journey, and Emma had this extraordinary journey in one season, and I had this little bit of time in season 3 to kind of establish a version of Charles. But to then feel like I could almost villainize or make him a villain from going from victim was really exciting. But that was always the kind of plan, I guess. Yeah.
Is it fun to play the villain version, just like a little bit, when you get to let loose and some of this?
Yeah, there's always like, inevitably you're never actively playing the villain, because then it's rubbish, and no villain thinks they're a villain. It's like, that's the old thing of kind of the Edmonds, the Richard III's, the kind of Shakespeare villains. They were all sort of, they all believe what they were doing was right and that the rest of the world are wrong. And I also, I'm not saying that Charles in our show is like a Richard III sort of character. I just think that, his behavior at times is bad, but also they're a troubled relationship. And the context, which Peter does right amazingly, the context of that marriage is someone who wasn't allowed to marry the person he loved, and someone is presented to him as the perfect person for the family, just not necessarily for him. So, yeah.
Emma, I wanted to go back to what you said about Diana's physicality being what opened the character for you, which is so interesting to me for someone who has so much written about her, has so much public documentation of who she was. But you said you wanted to build her from kind of the inside out. Why was that the thing that unlocked her more so than a biography or identity or something?
Pretty much because of what you just said. I like watched that documentary a lot, the In Her Own Words one, and I read a lot of biographies and read through the research that the Crown team gave me, and I sort of like felt like I'd been presented and understood what all these facts were telling me, and the person who they communicated. I think we all are sort of familiar with to some extent, but I felt like it didn't give me anything that, as an actor, I could feel like gave me a sense of her in any way that I would play her. And then what changed it was we got the scripts. And so then I had our story and our telling of Diana, which is essentially a character that Peter is obviously based in reality, but also to a huge extent is fictionalized. And so that really helped. So then I had her arc throughout the series. And then I remember Polly and I just like working in the studio on a number of days and just, yeah, over a number of days and just like figuring her out. We'd take a scene and we'd break it down and think, okay, what is she going through here? Why is she saying that? What do we think she's thinking? Oh, she's thinking this. Well, in that case, does this mean she always feels this way about that thing? Should we make that thing what she sort of, it's and sort of building her sort of like, yeah, her tics and the things that she feels moment to moment and sort of, yeah, I guess fleshing out this character. And then in terms of physicality, obviously watching footage of her, which is so helpful, she sort of really hands you a kind of plate full of physicality with the way she tilts her head and the way her voice and the uniqueness of her mannerisms. And again, I didn't want to just like mimic that. And I know that you did the same with Charles, Josh. Like we didn't just want to mimic this because how do you really use it as an actor? Do you just throw in a head tilt occasionally that like be like, oh, okay, that's her. So Polly and I sort of, I know Polly did this exercise where she got me to walk around a room and said, imagine there were loads of lasers pointing at you and all those lasers are like people's attention. It's the public's eye and that pressure, and it's the royal family and their pressure. And then what does that make you do? And automatically I started sort of avoiding the lasers like this. And then we were like, okay, well, that's what we think of. And so anytime you feel like pressure or that you don't really want to be seen, but you kind of want to be seen, it was that sort of thing. So it helped justify all the sort of mannerisms and things. Yeah.
When you're handed a scene like their engagement interview, kind of with that, when you watch the version of The Crown and the real one side by side, like they're so the same. Like, how do you avoid that mimicry that you're talking about? Because they are so identical, but it seems like you guys take the room to do something that maybe isn't exactly what happened in the past, but feels authentic to these characters that you're playing. What do you do in that specific circumstance?
I can't remember what we did with that one. We watched the footage, I think. That was actually one of the only ones.
Well, I mean, there is the thing about, and if you go back to, again, season 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm sure they'll do it in the future, there is a kind of, as Emma rightly put, like ultimately this is a work of fiction, but what Peter does just to kind of keep us in the loop, basically keeps the audience in the loop, rather than say 1972, December the 14th or whatever, he'll just plant a scene which we all know really well. It places it back into a very specific time. It's very nostalgic, and it just kind of brings us, it basically arcs the story. And so it's not saying everything you're witnessing here is real. It's just saying, here is a moment to remind you of where we are in history. And so those little moments include the engagement announcement is a very great example of that. And so, as Emma said, we're very rarely looking at footage and going, that is this scene, and let's try and replicate that. But those scenes, I think there is a little bit of that. I think you want audiences to understand where you are.
I remember we talked about this because I certainly was really like curious as to why they were never going to include the actual wedding. And yeah. Well, like everyone's seen it. You can Google it and watch it. So what would be the point of us doing it? It will never look the same. It's a waste of time. And what is it really communicating? Like that day on the wedding, it's a wedding, everyone saw it on TV. Everyone was sort of not really being themselves. But I remember when we saw that the engagement interview was actually going to be in a script, saying to him, okay, well, what about this then? Because you can watch that on the internet. And Peter said, well, watch that, Peter. Why is this online?
That's rubbish.
And I remember him saying, or someone saying, that it was because of the dynamic at that time in that interview just happened to be so rich in
Mm.
reading the lines of like what was going on. Because people talk about it, watching the interview and seeing the way she like looks when Charles says whatever love means. And it was such an sort of, yeah, quite obvious that it was must have been a quite a big thing for them after that moment. Um, so I think that's also a reason why it was included. And so we had that sort of beat to play of like, oh, okay, this is actually informing the story we're telling. Because then Diana's on the phone to her friends being like, did you see the way he looked at me? And that from that interview, it sort of starts the cascade of her spiral in that episode.
I wonder how the fashion plays into that too, where there are there are Diana looks that are really famous as well that are kind of replicated throughout this, and like I feel like they kind of work as touchstones in that way to kind of like anchor you into history. So when
Yeah.
you kind of step into a scene like that, does it being in that fashion kind of help you in the same way of like linking you to that point of the past, and then you can kind of take the character where you need to from there?
Sort of. Um, yeah, I guess, but it's never really, yeah, for me, I do, it might be different for different actors. For me, it's never really about that. I feel like the costume is like for me the last thing that like binds it all together, but it doesn't really anchor me in a scene. I guess it sort of adds to it in the way. Yeah, I think it's definitely more for the viewer than it is for the actor. I don't know if you agree, Josh. I might be.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, the I guess fashion doesn't isn't necessarily the same for Charles as it is for Diana. But I think, I've heard Emma talk about how those costumes and how the fashion affected where you are. And I know that Amy and you worked very closely on what those
Yeah.
emotionally where they are. But I agree. I don't think I think you're right that I think you're right, Katie, that the like historically it might help place, but for Emma, I think it's a different
Hmm.
like relationship, isn't it?
I kind of know what I mean though. There was one, I mean, obviously the costumes were just incredible. And there were a few scenes where what I was wearing really helped. Like, no, actually, I think you are right. Like in the scene where she's walking down the steps in New York and she's wearing that like bolero jacket. And I felt so like words like a sore thumb, not in a sore thumb in a bad way, but like really, because I if like the inside state versus her outside state, which is what we sort of played with a lot, and she's sort of decked out in this insane ball gown, but inside she's feeling like she wants to absolutely die, and that was when it became really interesting. And I guess you get a bit of that in the engagement scene where she's
Yeah.
sort of presenting this real like perfect performance, and then inside there's like so much conflict. And I think increasingly throughout the series you see that, especially when she's in, yeah, doing her tour of the states and stuff, and she's in these amazing outfits and people are like, it's sort of that assumption that if you look like fantastic and really put together then you must be really put together, when she was sort of crumbling inside. And I think that is what they did so well.
And I think about the Australia tour and the kind of big ballroom dance scene where Charles and Diana both look fantastic, and it's this moment of unity as a couple, and like it feels like the outside and the inside are merging for once, and you have to look the part to make that work, and it all looks so well.
Yeah, totally. The costumes were just amazing, and Amy Roberts and Sid Roberts who worked together are just like the best. They were so great to work with.
For people who came of age, after all of this time period, and the season does so well, like in mirroring Thatcher and Diana, like these huge forces in British society at the time. What was that '80s historical education like for you both? Did it make you reflect on your own childhoods, or Britain overall differently than what you understood before this?
I think the Thatcher. I mean, certainly in film and television, we've discussed the sort of Thatcher regime, the Thatcher years quite heavily, and so and even films projects that I've done where I've where it's been set in Yorkshire or Wales or wherever, you see, like when you're filming there, you see the effects of Thatcher. We all witness the effects of Thatcher regime every day, and so in that sense, I feel like Margaret Thatcher is ever present in British society and
Yeah.
culture. Um, Diana is a fascinating one because actually, I found it really. I learned so much being part of that story, just in terms of what Diana did for fame. And like, arguably fame, celebrity was going to happen anyway to the extent it did because of social media and the way media has changed so much in the last, 30, 40 years. But I think regardless, like Diana was a huge moment for a huge shift in how we treated celebrity, how we worshipped celebrity at times. And so I think, the Thatcher stuff, obviously, inevitably we kind of witnessed that. But I agree with you. I think that the Diana stuff is really relevant to a younger audience right now, and where that all kind of started, because it sort of started with Diana, I think.
Before they close us out, a final question for both of you. I mean, as you've been talking about this show for 2 years, basically, you're revisiting so many moments from making it. Is there anything that when you go back and talk about it, when you think about it, that just sticks out for you as a special moment on set, or that felt the most surprising, or that you just enjoy revisiting the most from making this?
I would say the people, like really the people. Like from absolutely the moment I stepped into the read-through room with everyone there, from like hair and makeup to costume to crew to producers to directors and obviously the cast, like everyone was just like, it felt like we'd known each other for ages. There was such an ease, there was such a sense of welcome, a sense of sort of everyone loving this job and really being so good at what they do. And also, I remember Amy Roberts, who did costume, used to have this thing she used to say when she popped into your trailer to like check your costume. And when saying goodbye, she was like, "Bye, sweets, loving you, loving your work." And it's just sort of what she said all the time. She'd be like, "Goodbye, loving you, loving your work." And I started using that now because I love it. And that's kind of it summed up that for me. Everyone was very full of care for each other and so respectful of the work that everyone was doing. And it just made for a fantastic project. And I feel like because everyone was having such a good time and wanting to be good for everyone else, there was a sense of all coming together to make something really special. And yeah, it's very rare on jobs, I think, to have that specific sort of chemistry of feeling consistently as well. And I think that, I mean, obviously, writing remarkable, the part to play was incredible, a challenge, like glorious character, but that particularly stood out.
Yeah, I think the opportunity to play a character for like such an extended period of their life, and take it from, whatever I took, I think I was like 20 or 21-year-old, or even younger, I think like a 20-year-old to someone in his late 30s. That's sort of crazy and amazing. And yeah, as Emma said, look, the biggest thing about The Crown, and the thing that everyone says time and time again, is this thing about a company of actors and an amazing crew. And it is true. There is, and I think it extends to the other series. You feel this sort of, if you ever bump into the Vanessa Kirby's or the Claire Foys or the Matt Smiths, there is this like bond that we all took this journey on, and we handed over the baton. I'm sure it'd be the same for the next cast. I think that so rarely happens, and we still interact with each other on WhatsApp, and I don't think that will go away. And so yeah. I miss that the most, and I just miss my mate, but we that's what's great, is we've got this like bond, and we come together, and hopefully the Emmys we can all be together again. So.
Oh my god, I'm praying. We deserve that so much, to be in one room together celebrating. Like, we just haven't had it.
Yeah.
Regardless of when it.
Have you seen each other in person in any of this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've met up and stuff, but I mean, like, us collectively as a company, we have not seen like all together. We never got the chance to have a wrap party or anything.
No.
So even if it's not the Emmy, just like point we need
you deserve to dress up and celebrate each other. I think we can all
agree.
Well, Emma Corrin and Josh O'Connor, on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you both for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.